My story started off quietly, but what happened next was anything but that. When I moved to a small town because of my husband Diego's job, I decided to work as a teacher, believing it would be the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. I was excited, imagining that this change would allow me to be more social and maybe even make new friends. However, what I didn't know was that I was about to dive into an environment full of dark secrets and silent intrigues, where I would be tested in ways I could never have imagined. Within the first few weeks, I became the target of cruel gossip and malicious rumors about my personal life. Former colleagues were spreading lies that I had relationships with students and was cheating on my husband. It was absurd, but the entire school seemed to be conspiring against me. This wasn't just an attack on my reputation, it was a clear attempt to isolate me and destroy me professionally. I went to the principal, hoping she would take action. But instead of offering support, she dismissed me, saying I was being paranoid and that rumors were just part of the school environment. A disturbing feeling washed over me. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I decided to investigate. And the more I looked, the more disturbing things I uncovered, and what I found was far worse than I ever expected. So, I carefully devised a meticulous plan of revenge against those people, recording conversations, gathering documents and evidence. And the result? Well, get ready, because the way this story unfolds will surprise you. I'll tell you everything, in vivid detail.
Hey guys, welcome to our channel.
I've always been a shy person. I grew up in a metropolis, surrounded by a noisy and impersonal urban environment, but oddly enough, my life seemed to go unnoticed. In high school, I had a small group of friends, nerds as we were called. There were 4 of us, me, Sophia, Carlos, and Diego. We were inseparable, but I always knew there was something different about us, like we existed in a bubble only we understood. Over the years, Sophia and Carlos ended up together, a romance that's lasted to this day, with 5 years of marriage and a daughter. Diego, younger than me, also became an inseparable part of my life. He was different, yes, and I knew everyone commented on the age difference. But I didn't care. Over time, what seemed unusual to others became natural for us. We got married, and today we have a beautiful daughter named Renata. Diego has always been ambitious, and his career in IT soon led us to the Midwest, a place I saw as an opportunity to start over. A place where no one knew me. I wondered if I could finally leave behind the ghosts of rejection from my childhood and teenage years. I thought, maybe this was my chance to become a more confident version of myself. Life was peaceful. Diego supported our small family comfortably, and his mother, who had moved in to help, took care of Renata. I had time, space, and support. It was in this context that I decided to go back to college and get my teaching certification. Math had always been my passion, and with a shortage of teachers in the field, I quickly got my license. This is where things started to take an unexpected turn. I was hired at a rather peculiar school. It was an independent study charter school. Not what I expected, a typical secondary school. It was a credit recovery school. The idea was simple. Students who, for whatever reason, didn't fit into the regular system could graduate in a more flexible environment. We served students from grades 9 to 12. The students scheduled appointments and came in on their own time, met individually with teachers, received assignments and projects, and essentially earned a legitimate high school diploma. But there was something about the school that gave me an odd sense of discomfort, something I couldn't pinpoint right away. There were few teachers, and they all seemed to have a closeness that I couldn't penetrate. At first, I tried to fit in. I ate lunch alone, sometimes called Diego, but I didn't want to bother him too much. He was making friends at his new job, while I seemed stuck in the same sense of isolation I'd carried since childhood. The irony of it all? The students liked me. A lot. They sought me out, turned in their work, and progressed quickly. Faster than my colleague students. This didn't go unnoticed. After just a few weeks, it became apparent that my students were scheduling more appointments to see me than other students were scheduling to see their teachers. Every time a student finished a project or assignment for a teacher, regardless of the subject, they would turn it in to their main teacher, the one who had the student on their primary list. Soon enough, it was clear that the students on my list were finishing their assignments and graduating faster than my colleagues. Over time, I began to feel like I was finally fitting in. The other teachers treated me well, or so it seemed. There were even mandatory social gatherings, small get-togethers that made me believe I was building something. But then, the principal called me in and told me that someone had come to her, accusing me of being arrogant and antisocial, as if I was setting myself above the others. and that I wasn't good for the school environment. I was stunned.
Who would have said that?
But when I asked, she was evasive, saying it was confidential and that I should just work on being kinder, which sounded like a veiled warning. I didn't want to seem uncooperative or confrontational, so I apologized for hurting someone's feelings. I didn't want to make enemies, especially in a place where I still felt so out of place. What happened next made everything even stranger. I also pointed out that the students on my list were graduating at a good pace. My principal agreed with me and praised me warmly. The vice principal happened to be passing by and heard the principal praising me. He also commented that I was an exemplary teacher, that students were praising me privately to him, and that there were even plans for growth for me within the school. It was at this moment that a disconcerting revelation came to light. One small, maybe big, red flag was when they told me that the more students graduated, the more money the school would receive. And if teachers could get more students to complete their tasks, there would be bonuses. All of this sounded good, but something didn't quite fit. A part of me couldn't ignore the feeling that there was more behind those flattering words, especially right after an apparent warning. The whispers, the anonymous accusations, the sense of isolation, and the fact that despite all my student success, the atmosphere among my colleagues seemed to crumble around me. The school, which at first seemed like a fresh start, now hid secrets. And I wanted to find out what exactly was going on there. From the first day, something about that school didn't feel entirely normal. There was a strange sense of routine, almost automatic, that hovered over the place, like each person was stuck in an invisible choreography, a dance I didn't yet know the steps to. Each of us teachers had our own list of students completing the necessary credits. In theory, the school had more than 200 students spread across the various lists, but curiously, I never saw more than 10 students at the same time in the silent hallways. It was as if there were more people on paper than in reality. Each student seemed to appear and disappear like a ghost, attending appointments I rarely witnessed. With so much idle time, the teachers gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices. They were incredibly close, almost unsettlingly so. The principal, vice principal, the counselors, all seemed synchronized, their relationships so rooted that I, the newcomer, felt like an intruder in a secret world. But the more I observed, the more a subtle question began to form in my mind. What was really happening at that school? The teachers, the sporadic students, the way everyone seemed so coordinated, almost rehearsed. There was something unsettling, a feeling that I was only scratching the surface of a bigger secret. I've always had a knack for connecting with students, and within a few weeks, they trusted me more than the other teachers. Meetings with them became frequent, more so than the meetings I saw my colleagues having. This surprised me, but at the same time, something about this behavior intrigued me. Every time a student completed an assignment, regardless of the subject, they brought it directly to me. I was the main teacher for several of them, which meant I had to oversee their progress. But it quickly became clear that the students under my supervision were advancing faster than the others. They were graduating at an accelerated pace, exceeding expectations. Since I started working at the school, what was once 5, at most 10, students in the classroom at the same time became 20 or more, and almost all of them were students under my supervision. They spent hours there, immersed in their tasks in the almost unsettling silence of the classroom. Initially, I saw this as something positive. The more the students worked, the faster they could graduate and move on with their lives. But as the days went by, I began to notice something curious. My colleagues didn't seem as pleased with a full room as I had imagined. There was a silent tension, furtive glances of disapproval. At first, I thought it was just in my head, but soon the evidence began to pile up. I began to suspect that many of them had settled into a comfort zone, where long idle periods were used to browse the internet, play on their phones, or simply gossip, rather than actually teaching. The increase in the number of students under my responsibility, instead of being seen as progress, seemed to disturb the tranquility of their private world. Over time, I began to notice a disturbing disconnect. The school didn't seem to care as much about real learning. There was something behind the system that bothered me deeply. The focus wasn't on truly teaching, on ensuring the students left with meaningful diplomas.
No.
It was as if the entire process was just a formality, a stamp of approval. Gradually, I noticed the pattern. Any student behind on credits could simply pick up a packet of activities from the subject teacher. The student would complete the material, hand it to the responsible teacher, who, almost without hesitation, would sign off on it. It didn't matter if the content was really absorbed, if the student had learned anything relevant. What mattered was the result on paper, satisfactory. And all of this was backed by the fact that we were licensed professionals. At its core, anyone paying even minimal attention could see that some of my colleagues' work was mechanical, almost robotic. It was too easy, too automatic. Over time, I began to question. Did everyone there know what was happening and simply accept it? Or was there something more, something hidden in the shadows of this seemingly normal routine? The more I observed, the clearer it became. There was something wrong with that school. And I was determined to find out what was really happening behind so many easy approvals. And the more I watched, the more I realized that maybe it wasn't just a matter of complacency. There was something that needed to be uncovered. At a meeting, the principal put me on a pedestal, praising the record I'd set for graduating more students than any other teacher. The momentary pride soon turned to discomfort. From that moment, the atmosphere changed. The looks became colder, more piercing. It was as if, by being praised, I had crossed an invisible line, awakening envy or resentment. The coldness with which my colleagues began to treat me was palpable. I noticed the sideways glances and whispers. Being ignored was never new to me, but there, in that school, the silence carried a different weight. The exclusions manifested in colder, subtler ways. In the teacher's lounge, there were always chuckles and whispered conversations about parties and after-work hangouts. It was always the same script. Everyone's going, except me, of course. I was never invited. I pretended not to care. And in part, it was true. My passion for helping students and feeling like I was making a difference gave me the strength to ignore the pettiness. But the truth is, it affected me deeply. It was a void I carried in silence. I chose to focus on what truly mattered, my students and their success. Some students subtly began to complain. Ms. So-and-so didn't even look at my work. They complained cautiously, as if they knew they were treading on dangerous ground. I would never speak ill of my colleagues. That was a line I wouldn't cross. However, I knew what was happening. I saw the stacks of work being passed from hand to hand without being properly graded. Random evaluations, as if the grades magically appeared. So I began to act. Discreetly, of course. I analyzed the assignments carefully, looking for errors and inconsistencies. When I saw a clearly misgraded paper, I set it aside, called the student for a private conversation, inserted a new cover sheet, and gently suggested they revise their work, seeking a deeper understanding of the content. The instruction was always the same. Turn it back into your teacher and ask them to grade it in front of you. Tell them you're eager to see the results of your effort. But I knew I was treading on thin ice. Each time a student went back to their teacher with a revised paper, I risked being discovered. And the consequences could be severe. After all, who was I to question the authority of my colleagues? It was risky. I knew the other teachers didn't like when students did this. They felt challenged, as if I were exposing what was happening behind the scenes. And perhaps I was. But the students? Oh, they appreciated my dedication. They didn't complain. They simply followed the instructions, quieter than ever, but with a sparkle in their eyes that told me they were noticing something. Maybe, like me, they knew there was something deeper, something dark behind that facade of normality. Most of the teachers seemed to have given up on actually teaching. Instead of grading the work, they preferred to just stamp any grade and move on with their lives. The strangest thing was, they began to see me as a threat. I was the island of sanity in a sea of mediocrity. And it didn't take long for the complaints to start. The other teachers began murmuring that I was taking too long to grade the packets, delaying their students' graduation. But what really surprised me was how the narrative changed. Suddenly, rumors started circulating. The students, especially the boys, only came to see me because they wanted to get with me. Then, the cruelest rumors spread like wildfire. I was involved with the students. But the story didn't stop there. Now, they were saying I was manipulating my graduation rates, that my results were fraudulent. They were determined to bring me down any way they could. Each day, new questions arose. Why so much interest in sabotaging me? What did they know that I didn't? And above all, how far were they willing to go to bring me down? I began to feel watched all the time. I had the sense that someone was spying on me, that someone wanted to incriminate me. I needed to find a way to stop those rumors. I needed to prove I was innocent. But how? And I wondered if I would ever regain my reputation. I tried to stay calm, focus on what mattered. But inside, something started to stir. I'm not the type to stand by idly, letting others' malice destroy my reputation. If things reached a breaking point, I would have to act. I'm mature enough, but I'm no saint either. Revenge wasn't out of the question. I spent 12 years overcoming difficulties when I was younger. I wasn't going to let my adult life turn into another battlefield. I decided it was time to talk to the principal. If she dealt with the bullying and nipped it in the bud, great. I could simply go back to my work and leave it all behind. After all, she always seemed friendly, although a bit more concerned with increasing the school's profits than truly ensuring student learning. I explained to her that students, discreetly, had been coming to me to tell me that Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. Such-and-such were spreading terrible rumors about me. They said I was dating a student or cheating on my husband. More than one student had come with that story, and I knew they weren't joking. My relationship with them was solid, and they trusted me. But what was happening was serious. The principal's response, however, was a shock. The principal, who always seemed so understanding, now revealed a dark, manipulative side and said I was exaggerating. She downplayed my concerns, accusing me of paranoia.
This is a school, she said.
Rumors are part of the territory. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, I replied, but rumors usually come from students, not adults. She ignored my remark and continued, "You need to grow up and let these little things go. Be the bigger person." Of course, I recorded the entire conversation. I took my phone with me and captured every word she said. Then the vice principal appeared, casually. I hoped that when he entered the room, he would listen to what I had to say, that he would understand the gravity of what was happening. But to my surprise, what happened next was even more disturbing. The principal didn't even mention the rumors. Instead, she and the vice principal started reprimanding me. They complained that I was causing problems, that my focus on correcting the math packets was disrupting the school's pace, that I was creating a bad reputation. The feeling that something more sinister was going on grew even stronger. I left the office with a chill down my spine. But the question was, how far did this web of intrigue and secrets extend? I was no longer just dealing with petty rumors. I was involved in something much bigger, and with each step I took, I felt like I was getting closer to a truth that no one wanted me to uncover. Intrigued, I continued to investigate on my own. I sifted through emails, looked for patterns, tried to connect the dots, among other things. And the more I investigated, the more convinced I became that the rumors about me were nothing but a smokescreen to hide something much more sinister. Someone wanted to silence me. Someone wanted to destroy me. But I wasn't going to let them win. With every new discovery, the web of lies became more complex, revealing a world of intrigue and betrayal I never imagined existed within those school walls. A few days later, they called me into a meeting and started complaining that I was being too meticulous in grading the math assignments from other teachers' students. I listened in silence for a moment, but my blood was boiling. They were criticizing me for doing what was right, for following the rules they themselves had given me. I calmly explained that I was just following the employee manual and applying the standards from the 2-day seminar that all of us, independent study teachers, were required to attend before starting. But it didn't seem to matter. They wanted me to play the game. Play the game? I asked. The response was an insult disguised as advice. The principal laughed with disdain and called me pretentious, insinuating that I was trying to be the female version of Jamie Escalante, the legendary calculus teacher. The vice principal, with a condescending smile, encouraged me to use my professional judgment, which was basically a euphemism for faking grades. They wanted me to pass assignments that clearly didn't deserve to pass. Remember, the more students passed, the more money they earned? I recorded everything, every word. And just to be safe, I made a backup and sent the MP3 file to my personal email. I knew I was entering dangerous waters, but I couldn't accept what was happening there. The school was incredibly skilled at hiding its true face. Whenever a school board inspection was announced, the principal orchestrated a kind of theater. She demanded that we grade 3 or 4 packets impeccably. These exemplary packets were carefully placed in a cabinet in the middle of the room, as if they represented the average of our work. It was a clever trick, a facade that gave a false impression of seriousness. Meanwhile,
there are invisible scars that shape lives. Abuse steals your peace, but not your strength. Breaking the Cycle of Abuse is an interactive guide where you'll find powerful tools to identify the signs of abuse, understand the dynamics of violence, find shelter and legal and psychological support, plan a safe exit from a harmful environment, overcome trauma and rebuild your self-esteem. Start your journey of healing and transformation now for just $9.60.
seriousness. Meanwhile, the rest of the packets, with invented grades, incomplete work, and fraudulent evaluations, were stored in cabinets at the back of the room, where the inspectors were never invited to look. There was an unspoken rule at the school. Once students graduated, we emptied their folders. Only the cover sheet, with the grade and the teacher's fake comments, was kept. The rest? Destroyed. That way, any evidence that the content was never properly done or evaluated disappeared. It was a perfect scheme to make the numbers look good. But the question remained, how far would they go to preserve this lie? The secretary was seen destroying piles and piles of fake work, keeping only the covers. It was like watching a theater of the absurd, and I was recording everything. During this time, I moved through the classroom in a calculated way. I tried to appear distracted so that the other teachers wouldn't suspect I was watching their screens. When I got close enough, it was always the same scene. They were browsing Facebook, Plenty of Fish, or shopping on eBay, while a student waited patiently in front of them, supposedly there for an interview. One day at home, I asked Diego if he knew how to set up a remote microphone that I could control from afar. He laughed. "Are you trying to be James Bond now?" He, always the tech genius, didn't question why I needed it. For him, it was as easy as child's play. The next day, he brought me what I asked for, a wireless microphone that I could turn on and off remotely. "This is amazing," I said. "Can I have more?" He smiled, knowing I was up to something but not asking any questions. And so, the next day, I had a dozen of them. My plan was perfect. I wanted to make sure my devices didn't appear in the other teachers' Bluetooth connections. I always arrived at school first because, let's be honest, my colleagues were lazy. Even though we were all supposed to be at our desks by 8 a.m., they would show up at 8:10, 8:20. Meanwhile, I was already there by 7:30, ready to act. Silently, I went in and placed a microphone under each desk. Each microphone had a small watch battery that should last for quite some time. I brought an old smartphone I no longer used and installed a high-capacity SD card Diego had gotten for me. I connected the phone to the microphones as a wireless audio input. Then I pressed record. For 2 weeks, day after day, I listened to the teachers. Most of them used Bluetooth headsets. After all, shouting gossip across the room had become outdated. And there they were, saying the most absurd things, completely oblivious to what was happening around them, while I documented every word, every phrase that would condemn them. The silence in that room was my greatest ally. As the other teachers left, laughing and whispering as if they were above suspicion, I was there, quiet in my corner. What they didn't know was that while they laughed behind others' backs and said terrible things, I was listening to everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I could have ignored those trivial conversations, but something told me there was more. What kind of secrets could be hiding behind those malicious jokes? That's when the first spark appeared. Their computer Bluetooth connections left everything exposed to me. The venom they spewed was about other teachers, the principal, and even the students themselves. Malicious gossip, insults disguised as jokes, and what hit me like a punch to the gut, false rumors about me. They called me the stuck-up idiot from the big city, a pretentious loner, someone they made a point to exclude. What really made me realize I was onto something big was when they started bragging about how they tricked the system. Untouched tests, falsified reports, rigged audits.
"It's easy," they said.
While I, disciplined and committed, carefully corrected every test and truly dedicated myself to teaching them, they were just pretending. And I, during my solitary lunches, listened to it all. I recorded everything. I knew I had to act. But how?
And when?
With each passing day, the anxiety grew inside me. I knew that if I waited too long, they might find out what I was doing and try to silence me. But the exact moment I decided I couldn't wait any longer was when my last student finally completed her credits, ironically, in math, which I had meticulously corrected. When she graduated, the traditional sound of party horns echoed through the room. Her diploma was handed over with smiles, and the applause filled the air. Her parents were there, emotional, along with her little brother, taking pictures and thanking me with warm hugs. Everything seemed perfect. But behind the celebrations, there was a darkness that only I could see. No one at that moment had any idea what was about to happen. The facade of perfection, the joy in the photos, it was all just a superficial layer. Beneath that, something much darker was hidden, and I was about to reveal it. The trigger was about to be pulled, and the downfall for many of them was inevitable. Later, as I reviewed the audio recordings from that day, the true faces of those people emerged. Amid the laughter, the teachers made disgusting insinuations about me. They said I had switched side and made homophobic jokes, as if my respect for the students and their families was something to be mocked. The worst came when they started talking about my student and her family. Racist, cruel comments, stripped of any humanity. She, a Hispanic girl, and us, the educators, all white. The anger boiled inside me. The day was almost over, and I knew the time to act was now. The classes had ended. I left there with a sense of freedom I had never felt before. But I couldn't just leave without one last move. I sent emails to the police, the superintendent, the mayor, the governor, the school board, and even the local newspaper. Each one of them received a complete dossier with photos, audio, and videos I had gathered over the months. I detailed all the corrupt practices, the racism, the negligence. They wouldn't be able to ignore it. In a few weeks, the collapse began. One by one, all the teachers and administrators who had been involved in the dirty scheme were fired. Their licenses were suspended or revoked, and they're still facing criminal charges for fraud. What once was a stronghold of disdain and dishonesty crumbled in a matter of days. Only the innocent, like the cleaning staff, walked away with their reputations intact. And of course, the IT guy and the music teacher, the only ones who truly cared, remained standing. The school, once overflowing with falsehoods, was shut down. After a few months of abandonment, it was turned into an electronics store. Ironic, perhaps, that a place where corruption thrived now sold technology, something so transparent compared to those people. When I got home that day, Diego was waiting for me. I told him everything, and his eyes lit up in a way I had only seen during special moments. The justice I had delivered was the spark he had always wanted to ignite. And that night, before my head hit the pillow, a new life began to grow inside me. The end of that school marked the beginning of something new, something better. Not just for me, but for all the students who finally had the chance to learn in a place where truth and respect prevailed. Carlos and Sarah found it pretty funny. Since then, I've made new friends around town besides the IT guy, the music teacher, and my college friends, especially with student moms. Diego is killing it at work and is thinking about starting his own business. Now, life is great.
Want more mysteries, twists, and exciting moments? So you can't miss this video. Click now and continue this journey of fascinating stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any news. Leave your comments and see you next time.